Every year, an exclusive group of the 120 most powerful central bankers and policymakers from all over the world meet at Jackson Hole, Wyoming to discuss monetary policy behind closed doors at the Federal Reserve's annual conference. But this year, something unusual happened. At the exact same time, in the exact same place that the world's most influential central bankers met, a second event took place. The inaugural Wyoming Blockchain Symposium, which highlighted the state of Wyoming's recent legislation to pursue a digital dollar. Is it merely a coincidence that these two events happened at the exact same time in the same small town, population 10,000, in the same building right down the hall? Or is it giving us a clue as to what's coming next? Specifically, does it represent the foundation being laid towards a central bank digital currency or CBDC launch? CBDCs, or a programmable digital currency that controls how you spend, when you spend, and how you save, are not a conspiracy theory. In fact, the majority of the world is actively pursuing some kind of CBDC launch. However, here in the United States, there has been so much pushback by the people, for good reason, that a CBDC launch has seemingly been put on the back burner. But in the absence of the United States creating a CBDC, the state of Wyoming has decided to race the Federal Reserve towards the digital dollar. Hailed as America's crypto capital, the state of Wyoming has been creating legislation to support cryptocurrencies and digital payments for years. Now, some say that this is because the state has a high appetite for innovation, whereas others speculate that it has to do with the state's low population density and the ability to push through laws that support a handful of wealthy residents. Whatever the reason, the latest initiative by the state is to create a stablecoin tied to the US dollar. Now, I want to be crystal clear here. A stablecoin and a CBDC are not the same thing. A CBDC is central bank issued, and it would represent a digital version of the dollar, whereas a stablecoin is a type of cryptocurrency where its value is derived from the asset that it's tied to, such as the dollar. But don't worry, we'll talk about why it's still concerning. Now, the state of Wyoming claims that the goal of this digital dollar alternative is to foster monetary transactions free from government regulation. The obvious irony being here that it would be government controlled, issued, and operated. One of the primary benefits of other cryptocurrencies is the fact that it's decentralized. If we take Bitcoin, for example, the fact that it uses a publicly viewable ledger or blockchain helps facilitate transactions that would otherwise be censored or reversed or forged because it requires no mediator. The entire ethos, the idea of Bitcoin, is to help solve a trust problem that we have, for good reason, with banks and other financial institutions. I'm not sure how this fits into that. The other glaring issue here is the idea of this being a stable coin when its underlying asset is the dollar. In theory, stable coins are more stable, hence their name, than traditional cryptocurrencies, because other cryptocurrencies get their value from the currency itself, which could be volatile, whereas stable coins are pegged to the value of something else. The problem is that if we look at history, this idea has never done well. Maybe it works right now in the next 10 years, but what about 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years? If you want to build true generational wealth, the true power comes from holding the underlying asset itself. You could argue that the original stablecoin was the Bretton Woods Agreement. Go with me here. The dollar was pegged to a fixed value of gold, and other currencies were pegged to the dollar. The primary difference between the Bretton Woods Agreement and the proposed stablecoin being their underlying assets that they derive their value from. Gold being a true store of value, whereas the US dollar is obviously not. It's at the mercy of government spending and geopolitical risk. Hence the reason that we've lost over 25% of our purchasing power in the last 5 years. The other thing we can learn from this is how the Bretton Woods Agreement ended. Gold convertibility was suspended.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserves.
So the United States was able to keep what gold it had, whereas the rest of the world was stuck with US dollars that really had no value. There was a perceived value because everyone kind of had to keep using them, but they were stuck in a system that chipped away at their purchasing power. Of course, the true wealth in this example was gold. And if all of these countries had held tremendous amounts of gold to begin with instead of USD, they would have protected their wealth instead of being left with a made-up currency. And this exact scenario is why everyone needs to own physical gold today. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't trust that the Federal Reserve or the US government has my best interest at heart. I don't believe that they want me to protect my wealth outside of the system, because then that means that I have power. If you protect yourself with gold, they can't devalue it in the same way. They can't quietly confiscate it through taxes and inflation, which is why everyone needs a gold insurance policy in place. If you are concerned about any of this or you want a second opinion, I highly recommend you talk to one of our analysts to make sure that you're protected now before it's too late. Because this foray into digital dollars, to some, it might sound different and exciting, but this is not your standard cryptocurrency. This is government controlled, owned, and operated. And to many, they're raising alarm bells that this might be a gateway drug, if you will, into CBDCs. Because often what we see when one asset is pegged to the value of another, the underlying asset disappears. As citizens get used to using a government dollar stablecoin, the dollar as we know it today might quietly start to disappear as it's already unreliable and under attack. So what happens then? We're left with a completely new fiat currency with a made-up value, except this time around, that currency is also fully programmable. It dictates your every move. They monitor everything that you do. And it happened in the blink of an eye right under your very nose because they called it something different. Do not let this be our future. We have a window of opportunity, and I say a window because once it closes, once we all have a CBDC, we will not have the same freedoms that we have today. Imagine that you say something against the government online. Suddenly, your CBDC, you go to pay for gas or flights and you realize you can't travel anywhere, you're restricted. Or imagine you want to go buy gold, but you know what? The government says, I actually don't like that anymore. I don't want you to buy it because we can't control it. What I want to make sure is that everyone out there who's watching protects themselves now before this future is our reality. I know that it's a scary thought, but it's one that we must face. And the more people who are aware of what's happening, there is strength in numbers. So tell me below, what are your thoughts about this? Are you concerned? What are you doing to protect yourself? Thank you so much for being here. As always, I appreciate you so much. My name is Taylor Kenny with ITM Trading, your trusted source for all things gold, silver, and lifelong wealth protection. Until next time.